So dear respected Thay, dear brothers, dear sisters, I was reflecting a bit on teaching the Dhamma. Can you hear? I was reflecting on like what it is to teach the Dhamma. And when we look back at the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, he made the declaration to sit under that tree and not get up until he had woken up to the nature of things. So he wasn't trying to develop a style or become a very eloquent person. He wasn't trying to make himself up to be somebody important so that he could make a lot of money or become famous or powerful. And nobody knew that he was doing it. We talk about it today, but here he was alone by himself, forgotten by the world, forgotten by his parents, or they felt that he had left behind his true calling as a leader in the community. And I think we sometimes make the Buddha superhuman. We forget that he's also a human being like us, that he also suffered to be away from his family. He often questioned himself, what am I doing here? Why am I off in the woods walking around with a bunch of half-naked ascetics trying to figure out the meaning of life? Is this all just a waste of my time? But fortunately, even though he might have, I think he had those thoughts, those doubts, he continued on his path. There was something in every day, every moment that woke him up to joy, that woke him up to some spark of life that he was discovering. And I invite us today to get in touch with that spark of life within us that has been transmitted to us. It's very helpful to look back on our ancestors, on our parents, our mother, our father. We have blood ancestors, we also have spiritual ancestors like the Buddha. For some of us it might be Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Moses, or a spiritual teacher from our tribe, from our community. All of those teachers have in some way let go of themselves. If they really get in touch with the true awakening, they somehow have let go of their ego or their need to have a title or a position, to be respected, even just to be remembered. I think it's in the old Kadampa tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. They have a saying which I like very much, which is, imagine the end of your life in a dark cave. It's cold, it's wet, and nobody knows you're there. That is the setting out for the place of setting out on your practice. And of course that's not our Plum Village tradition, but I find it helpful because many of us imagine that when we die, when this body ceases to function in its usual way, and we have the bacteria taking over, our heart stops beating, our breath stops. Many of us believe that it will be very peaceful, very we will have good relationships with our family, our friends, our spiritual brothers and sisters on the path. But that is only an idea. And the reality is that many people die in tremendous pain from sickness, from so physical sickness, but also deep mental suffering. Suffering from their relationships to others, suffering from relationship to themselves, suffering because they can't cope with their mind. And so that's what that saying helps me to touch is if I get caught in an idea of some kind of happy death where at the end of my life everything is fulfilled, that will make me suffer even more when at that moment it doesn't go as expected. And actually we're dying at every moment. So every moment things are happening not according to our expectation. Friends, family die. People who are dear to us, we are separated from them. People who we don't get along with, sometimes we have to live in a room with them. Sometimes we have to live in the same monastery, and we have trouble communicating with that brother, that sister. And so I really like to lower my expectations. I think some of us know Thay Jung. That's a phrase I think he likes to use in his practice. We have our expectations, lower them. And then whatever comes is like a gift from the universe. So the Buddha, when he continued to lower his expectations of the way things were around him, like he was getting really lousy food, begging from door to door. He would get wet in the rainstorm. He sometimes had to sleep in the mud. And from the outside, it would look like a pretty miserable life. If we saw somebody here at Deer Park come along and they're just walking through the forest, even though we are monks and nuns, we would probably wonder, who is this person? And maybe somebody would call the police. And yet the Buddha was living like that. Because in him he was getting peace, he was getting joy, he was getting somewhere. It was not completely realized, but he felt that he was touching something, and that something he called nirvana. We've been talking a lot about nirvana. Sometimes we translate it as extinction, and we learned about how the Buddha used the image of a flame. And nirvana is when the flame goes out, there's no longer fuel. So we can think of the flame as our passion, our desire, our afflictions. And as practitioners, we're learning how to recognize what is the fuel for that fire and how to remove it. And the Buddha had the insight that what we consume through our eyes, our ears, our nose, tongue, body, and mind, that it is the fuel for our afflictions. And it's not only that, so it doesn't mean we have to stop seeing, stop hearing, stop tasting, stop smelling, but it's how we see, how we hear. What relationship do we have with our perceptions? What goes on in the mind when we perceive things? Do we start to grasp towards them, right? So we talked about grasping, upadana, and how we grasp at the 5 skandhas, at our body, feelings, perceptions, mental formation, and consciousness. And we think, this is me, this is mine, this is myself. And so that is the fuel for our suffering. So physical pain, that is a part of life. But the suffering that comes from grasping at our feelings, our perceptions, and so forth, that is the fuel that leads to afflictions. And nirvana is what we touch when we remove that fuel. And so today, we're on the, after going through teaching about the conditioned and unconditioned dhammas, learning about the historical dimension of the phenomenal world and the ultimate dimension, which is unconditioned. We're learning about nirvana, the unconditioned, and its nature, and how we've come to understand nirvana through Plum Village practice. And this is the present, the teaching of our teacher, Thay, his insight into nirvana. And we learned that nirvana is nirvana. There does not need to be nirvana with residue and nirvana without residue. This is a bit of a sidetrack in the history of Buddhism, that we talk about different kinds of nirvana. Already we know that nirvana is something that ultimately can't have any quality, any flavor, any smell, anything that can be ascribed to it. And that even the sign, even the word nirvana, of course, is a phenomenon. A phenomenon is not nirvana itself. And so that's something hopefully we'll go into a bit more today, the relationship between the sign and the nature of things. So we're on the fifth tenet. It is possible to touch nirvana in the present moment. This is cause for great joy and celebration. Because imagine if it were not possible to touch nirvana in the present moment, when all we have is the present moment. So it's a great happiness. We can touch nirvana in the present moment. So we can just take a moment, and I invite you to come back to your breathing, come back to your body. Let go of all your ideas about nirvana, all your ideas about practice, your ideas about what this teaching will be about today, questions you may have, what am I doing here? Just let go of everything. Thinking is not necessary for living, not necessary for breathing. So don't suppress your thinking, but just bring all your attention to your in-breath and your out-breath. You notice that there's still feeling in the body. I'm aware of the contact my feet make with the floor, my shoulders, my back. It's not a very painful feeling, a little bit of pleasant feeling coming from being aware of my breath, my body relax. But I don't grasp at any of those feelings. Anytime I notice myself, my attention, trying to stick to one thing, I just let it relax and let go. Just be. But gently directing it towards the breathing. Anytime I notice, I get lost, I get carried away in thinking about the future, regrets about the past. Any feeling, any perception, any emotion, mental formation, consciousness, any kind of sound, sight, smell, taste, physical sensation. Just be with the wondrous existence of this present moment. We can listen to the sound of the bell. We can open our eyes. So it's safer to do this sitting down than standing up if you're not used to the practice, because sometimes you can lose your balance. I'm very aware as I let go that I'm also letting go of my tendency to balance my body, but if I'm standing stably enough, and in fact we know there's some sutras where Shariputra goes through deep meditation standing up. Usually we tend to have an image of Buddhist meditation as something we do sitting down, but in the Plum Village practice we know we can go deeply into the present moment, whether we are sitting, whether we're walking, whether we're standing, whether we're lying down in deep relaxation. But the sitting meditation posture is more stable than standing sometimes. So let's come back to the image. This is, I'm using speech as a form of visualization. So we're visualizing the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. And you might have a slightly different image than I have. But that's fine. And he's made this determination to wake up. He's had a glimpse of nirvana. But he keeps looking, as we just did, at all of these conditioned phenomena in his body and how he continues to get stuck in reminiscing about the past. Maybe nostalgia for his parents, his family, his one son. Yearning for some past situation where there was happiness. And he's able to stop grasping at that, because he knows that that's not going to bring him happiness, grabbing onto those memories. And he started to see how that the more he goes into himself, the more that he understands the nature of his mind. It's not, interestingly enough, that he goes seeking someone to tell him what's going on in his mind. At first he does that. Just like all of us, we come to the monastery and we are looking to be free, we're looking to be happy. But and we need help. We are looking for advice how to do it. And so we come and we live with our brothers and sisters, and or maybe on a retreat, we with other practitioners, and we do what they're doing. We walk the way they walk, we talk the way they talk. And we feel more joy, we feel more peace. In Dhamma sharing, we listen to them share their insight. So in the same way, the Buddha, he went to at least 2 communities that we're aware of, but probably more. And he studied with masters or students of masters. And he learned their methods of meditation. But he wasn't satisfied. He is able to master their meditation practice to the extent that the leader of each of those 2 communities invited him to co-lead the community with them. They were so impressed with his peace, his calm, his ability to abide happily in the present moment. It's like you come, I remember one of our Dhamma teachers, Shantam Seth, when I was, before I ordained, I went on a retreat in Stonehill College outside of Boston in 2003. And Dhammacharya Shantam Seth, who leads wonderful pilgrimages to the Bodhi tree in India, he was giving a presentation. He said, just imagine if somebody came to a retreat with Thay, and by the end of the retreat, Thay invites him to come up and say, please co-lead this retreat with me. And I remember being very, like, wow. Even part of me, because I was young and kind of a bit brash, I say, yeah, I'm going to practice like that. It's like maybe Thay will invite me up and say, please, I see you're so realized in your meditation practice. Why don't you come up and lead this retreat? I have not attained what you have attained. There was some part of me in that I was in my 20s, but I didn't really think that. But it impressed on me just how marvelous and serious the Buddha practiced. He really was impressed people even before his awakening under the Bodhi tree. Already he had a kind of way of bearing himself, way of talking, way of being that impressed upon those around him his deep intention to wake up, to understand his own mind, to understand the Dhamma. And so that is something that always inspires me, and I try to remember it when I'm in the monastery. Because we all get lazy, and you want to read this or see some video, or and that's normal. We are also human, and we are affected by all of the things to consume that we have available today. And we know in our teaching we don't look at things as being good or bad, but rather we try to look and see how are we relating to those things that we're consuming. How do we relate to the images that come in through our eyes, our ears, and so forth. And that is the real essence. So in the Plum Village way, we don't try to cut off all of those sense doors and try to put you in a kind of vacuum chamber of sense deprivation. To try to just put you in there and get enlightenment, you probably go mad and end up in a mental hospital. Instead, we do it together as a Sangha, and we know that some of us are, we have very good seeds that we've received from our ancestors, from our spiritual ancestors, from our blood ancestors. And some of us, those seeds have not yet ripened yet, and for some of us they've ripened in certain areas. And so we also practice not to become jealous or try to compare ourselves with each other, but rather to see that the conditions are quite different. We come from different backgrounds, different cultures, and that is all just at the level of the historical dimension. And neither do we have to put on the robe of a monk or a nun to start the path. But actually we can start wherever we are, whether we have hair, whether we don't have hair, whether we are a long-term practitioner or just came for the weekend, whether we are a monk or a nun for 20 years, whether we are the abbot or the abbess, whether we are just the brother who does the compost. It's all just a skillful means. Anything that we do in the monastery is just at the level of science. So what is important is whether we grasp onto that, whether we're really attached to those signs. And the way we know is when afflictions arise. So we talked about already that nirvana is the cessation of delusion and the afflictions. It's not the cessation of the 5 skandhas. And cessation can happen, and then the affliction comes back. So we don't want to make absolute the words that we use to describe the teaching. It's not like we talk cessation is permanent forever, but rather it's something that we can experience in the present moment. Like probably now, most of us are not angry. And that means there's a cessation of anger. It's like that. It doesn't mean that the conditions for anger, some of them are still not there in your consciousness. There's still the seed of anger. But they're not sufficient conditions that have come together from anger to manifest in the present moment. And so that is what we mean, that anger is not manifested. So it's a cessation of anger. And with the 4 practices of right diligence, we have the practice of right diligence. So those afflictions which have already arisen, we know how to invite them to go back down. Or we can say unwholesome. Mental formations go back down. So we learned in the model of the mind that we have. We can talk about the mind consciousness, those things that we can see right now in the present moment in our mind, and the store consciousness, those things which we don't touch, we don't see directly manifesting, but we know that the seed of anger is there, the seed of mindfulness is there in the collective, in the called alaya consciousness, which is has an individual aspect but also collective aspect. And those individual and collective aspects interpenetrate. A beautiful image is one of a candle and many candles all together. A candle illuminates itself as well as the space around it. And when you put it together with many candles, it contributes to the greater light. So the individual and the collective are not separated. And the store consciousness operates at the individual level. We have, when in us we have conditions for anger, like we hear something, we have a perception, somebody says something about us that's not very nice, and then that waters the seed of anger in our store consciousness, and so that it comes up and manifests as a mental formation in our mind consciousness. And so if we want to touch nirvana in the present moment, we need to learn how to remove the conditions that are allowing the anger to manifest in the mind consciousness. So we learn how to not grasp onto that perception, that idea, that those words that somebody said. Most of us, we suffer because of our perception about other people's perceptions about us. And one of the great things to master as a practitioner is not to be carried away by our own perceptions of how other people perceive us. If you can do that, nirvana is very easy to touch. we are social beings. Yeah, human beings. We care about how others feel about us, and so we are always looking to see, well, what is that person? Do they like me? Do they not like me? And the reality is usually a mix. That you like somebody to a certain degree, but not too much. I think generally speaking, it's for everyone. It's like that. But as an individual, when somebody says something that is rejecting, and you want to be liked by that person, you suffer so much. And also when you dislike somebody and you feel like they're trying to force themselves on you and be around you all the time, you get very annoyed and you want to go away. So that is suffering. And that is many times in the Four Noble Truths, we talk about suffering coming about from being with those, being separated from those who we love, and then being forced to be together with those that we find unpleasant. But the reality is, it's not that there are only those groups of people that we love and those groups of people that we don't love, but actually sometimes we love the same people and sometimes we don't love. And especially those ones we're closest to, we have the strongest feeling sometimes of anger and hatred, right? That's a reality, at least as I experience it. So looking into our perceptions and seeing how we can continue to be joyful, continue to be happy, even when somebody speaks to us with anger, speaks to us with words of hate, that is a way of knowing, it's a litmus test for knowing where you are with your practice. When somebody starts yelling and screaming at you and berating you and saying, this and that, and you can continue to smile, and it's really in yourself, you're not caught in those words. That is a very good way to know whether you are practicing well. And so that's why many practitioners, they will go out and into the world, and they come to the retreat center to practice, to gain the solidity. But then when we go out, like as monks and nuns, we go out to lead a retreat and we have to work together, and there are moments of misunderstanding, and I want to do it this way, we always do it your way, and then we suffer. And so those are the moments like, what happened to the nirvana that you seem to have touched in your life up in the monastery? Seems to have evaporated. So maybe it wasn't nirvana. Really, it's still just a conditioned phenomena. You're still dependent on many conditions. And that is normal, of course. We need to eat, need to breathe air. It's very difficult to touch nirvana if somebody's strangling you. I don't say it's impossible, but it's difficult if you can't breathe, if you're starving to death, if you're dehydrated, and so forth. So there are basic conditions, things that we need. We need very stable temperature, very narrow range of temperature. I think if you're living on Mars, you freeze very quickly, even if you had air to breathe. And if you're too close to the sun, you burn up. So we are in this moment, we are on Mother Earth in this thin layer of atmosphere, thanks to the magnetic what do you call it? The Magnetosphere of the Earth. You've got these, the core of the Earth is made of mostly iron, and it's very dense in the center, and around it is molten iron, and it's spinning around inside of us, inside of the Earth, not inside of us. And thanks to that iron core of the Earth, it creates a magnetic magnetosphere, a magnetic field on the Earth. And that magnetic field actually protects us from a lot of the dangerous solar wind and other things that can hurt us, right, from the sun. And this is all the wondrous things of Mother Earth that allow us to be here. We cannot be alive without these things. And so we do have conditions that we need in order to live. Yeah, we recognize that. But do we need to be liked? Yes, of course. As we grow up, because we are a social being, and the most painful thing, one of the most painful things as a human being, is to be ostracized, to be cut off from the community. We know as monastics, when we break one of our major precepts, we can no longer live in communion with the community, and that is the most severe thing that can happen to us in our life as a monk or nun. So we have to be very diligent and practice the precepts well. Yeah. And the reason for that is that the monastery is a place of refuge. And if people want to come and take refuge here in the monastery, they need to know it is a safe place. And they know it is safe because the monks and nuns practice the precepts. So they feel like I can come and I can be at ease here. I don't have to put on all the stress and worry of my daily life, to worry about somebody trying to take me out on a date, or somebody try to abuse me or try to hurt me in some way, or steal from me or something like that. So that is why we create this kind of cradle in the monastery, these good conditions for others to come and practice. But as we become more solid there, we need to stand on our own 2 feet. And as monks and nuns, we stay in the monastery, but we also travel to lead retreats. And we have a chance to really put our practice to the test. And sometimes when we're not yet ready, but we're too ambitious, we go out on our own. And many of us find that we lose our practice because we get carried away by the collective energy of people who are not practicing in society, who are drinking, who are, in all kinds of, in a sexual relationship. But as monks and nuns, we know that, we are putting that aside in order to go deeper in our spiritual path. We want to, we will not accept anything except touching nirvana in the present moment. And so we easily start to let things go. And as novices, as aspirants, we come in and we still have a lot of habits. And so we get, the elder brothers and sisters tell us, okay, do this, do that. And we feel so frustrated. Why do they always tell me what to do? I'm a grown person. They tell me like my mom and my dad when I was a kid, and they treat me like a kid again. Don't they see that I'm an advanced spiritual practitioner? And we feel indignant, and we have many reasons to say that elder brother, that elder sister is not practicing correctly. How dare she tell me how to behave? And we may be right, but that is the best time to practice. Because ultimately, she may be right, she may not be right, he may be right, he may not be right, but how we respond to the situation is really where our practice is at. Are we able to hold that suffering? Are we able to let go of the perception? Are we able to allow for understanding and compassion to arise to that person who has said that thing or had that perception about us, and just be with it, even though it seems like inside you're screaming. You want to yell out and say, "This is not fair. How dare you treat me like this?" And this is not suppression. We're not talking about suppression. We're saying about letting go. Brother Thay recently gave a talk on letting go. So when these afflictions arise, like anger, we know how to let go of the perceptions that are feeding that mental formation. We let go of our idea about ourselves. Because that person who says that thing, they say we're like that, or they treat us like that. And so we think, how dare he? How dare he treat me like that? And we suffer so much. But if we let go of our idea about ourselves, there's no suffering. It's only because we have an idea about ourselves and we are warring with that concept of ourselves that we cannot accept, that has been imposed upon us by another person, that we suffer. But as soon as we let go, and we just smile, we become a teacher, we become a part-time Buddha. So touching the nirvana in the present moment is to become a part-time Buddha. And with continuous practice, it becomes more and more present. It becomes easier. And the deeper afflictions, sometimes then they have a chance to come up. And then you say, wow, I thought I was suffering before, but now this, oh my God. Like, whoa, that is like major suffering. I was speaking in Californian there. And can you be with it? Can you just be like, wow, that's so much suffering? And you lock yourself in your room and you don't want to go talk to anybody. And but being with that, can you be with it? And then you pick up a book, or you pick up something to read. And then it's like, this is too much suffering. I just have to go read this book for a while. Or whatever. And that's where you're at. That's where you're at. So okay, it's just too much. I got to put my attention somewhere else. And that can be, it can be a skillful means. We have the practice of appropriate attention. So we practice right diligence by knowing what is the appropriate place to put our attention. Attention in Sanskrit can be written manaskara or manasikara. And it literally means that kara is like to act, to do, and manas is the mind. So it's directing the mind to do something, right, in a certain direction. And so we talk about yoniso, manaskara. Yoniso, it means appropriate. It's the attention that is the kind of attention that will stop feeding the mental formation, the unpleasant or unwholesome mental formation. So we can translate it as appropriate attention. Attention is one of the universal mental formations. So anytime a moment of consciousness is there, attention is present. And that's very helpful to know, because if you are caught in your thinking, you feel carried away by your thinking, and you know that thinking, for a moment of thought to occur, it requires attention. If attention is not there, the thought does not manifest. So usually we feel like we're just being carried away by an unending stream of thought, and we have little or no control over those thoughts. We feel like we have control, but actually, because of what we've been reading, what we've been watching, how we've been consuming things, those thoughts are actually being affected by a collective consciousness. The media, the conversations, people around us. And so we think of ourselves as this individual, but actually we are, when we step back, it's like we're looking down on a colony of ants. when you look from a distance, it's like, wow, it's like when you from the night time here, we look across to the 15 and you see all the cars going back and forth, and you think, where are those people going? Some of them are going north, some of them are going south, all day long, north and south. Looks like a bunch of ants. And we can sit here as monks and nuns and think, oh, we have arrived, we are home in the here and the now. Look at all those people going back and forth like ants. And we can feel quite proud. But then we ourselves, we are also, if you step back in the monastery, we go to this activity, we go to that activity, and yet we think, oh, I'm like this, I'm like that. But when we look back, it's more or less like ants. We're going around just like everyone else in some way, shape, or form. We're also in the historical dimension. This body is a phenomenon. These feelings are phenomena, and so forth. The other day I was up on Cougar Pass, and actually the trail coming off of Cougar Pass to the green water tank, and I saw all of these ants in a line, many, thousands of ants. And I like to follow the line, like, where are they going? Where are they coming from? Those ants. They were crossing the path very slowly. Yeah? There are many kinds of ants all over the world, but tens of thousands of species of ants. But this ant was walking so slowly, and it was just at sunset, just after sunset, so at dusk. And so I followed the ants one way, because I saw the ants the way they were going, and they had a little white. What I saw were larvae of the ants, and they were going into a hole on one side of the path, and so I followed them back about 10 meters, and I found that there was another hole, and it seemed like they were carrying the eggs, the larvae from the one hole, and then moving to another one, and I don't know why. Like, who decided we're going to move? Like, today is today, dusk. Okay, guys, changing rooms. We're going across the path. I mean, who knows how they came up with this? Yeah, I'm not an expert on ants, but and so I was watching. Wow, he's carrying the larvae, and then going back, and then carrying the larvae and going back. That's why I have this image of, I like to step back from human beings and see myself like from, oh, he's just like another ant walking around. How does he get that idea? So in the phenomenal world, we are going back and forth, and we are getting carried by a collective. Just as the ants, they know through the scent when they come to an ant, there are chemical pheromones that they're able to detect from they kind of touch each other with their antennae, and they get some information about where that ant is going or where they've come from, and so that they are able to continue. And so now we know that this almost like a brain, kind of like a larger nervous system which occurs at the communal level. And that is what we call collective consciousness. And we also experience that as human beings. It's a collective consciousness. All those candles with their combined light. And so if we're not careful, then we are just carried away by the reinforcement we get from the media, from the news, from movies, from books, films, and music. And they penetrate our consciousness, and they have been perhaps penetrating our consciousness since we were very young. And and actually what we think of as ourselves is sometimes just an aggregate of all the things we've consumed in our family, in the media, and now many of us are born into the world of the internet. I remember the world before the internet. It feels like a world before a dream. A time when there wasn't this kind of instantaneous access to all the world's information every time you sit down at a computer. And it's very powerful how all these people entering data and making it available to others is getting into is changing the way we think, the way we do things. So that is so appropriate attention is knowing how to put our attention on things that nourish joy, bring peace, because the more peaceful, the more joyful we are, the easier it is to touch nirvana. We can always touch nirvana in the present moment, but when we are carried away by a strong emotion, it's more difficult. It's often more difficult because we are in so much pain. And oftentimes we are continuing to feed that pain through our thinking. But if we know that, as I said, manaskara is a necessary condition, it's called the universal mental formation because it's always there when a moment of consciousness is present. So we know that if we take our attention away from our thinking, the thought no longer has enough conditions to manifest. That is a very important insight. That's how you know how to change what you're putting your attention on. We call it changing the peg. So in this hall we don't have pegs, but sometime in some of our halls in Plum Village we have the old style of a wooden peg that would join two beams. And you'd put a hole in one beam and then the other, and you drive the peg through, and that holds the piece of wood together. And the way to replace a rotten peg is to take a new one and then drive it right in, and then the old one is pushed out on the other side. So when we have inappropriate attention, which is ayoniso, manaskara, inappropriate attention. And we suffer. It's easy to know. You have pain that comes from the mind. You're suffering. It means that you're feeding somehow an affliction, an unwholesome mental formation. So by changing the peg, we remove our attention from that thought that is causing us to suffer, and we change it to something that brings us joy. For example, we bring our attention to our breathing. And so when our attention is fully on our breath, there's not sufficient conditions, there are not sufficient conditions for a thought to manifest. That is stopping our thinking. And when we know and we master the art of stopping our thinking, then it becomes easier to touch nirvana. Because although we think our thoughts are neutral, they have a subtle tone, a kind of fragrance called vasana. Running out of space. Vasana. In this class we get to go into use the Sanskrit terms for fun. Vasana. Kind of like fragrance. Everything has a tone, a kind of every thought, although it may seem neutral, it has in some way, it can be leading to something that we want or something that we don't want. Something that we want to hold on to and have more of, or something that we want to push away. And so it's very helpful when you have a thought to look and see more deeply, like, is this a thought of something that I want, or is it something that I want to push away? Yeah. So when we think about ourselves and we ascribe qualities to ourselves, then often those things, they may be things that are positive that we want to have. But for some of us, sometimes it may also be things that things that are very painful, things that we don't like about ourselves. And we actually loathe ourselves, kind of self-hatred. So in either case, the thought has a tone. That's a kind of perfume. You can translate vasana as perfume. And so that thought, it perfumes the seeds in our store consciousness. So it has a quality of strengthening or weakening the seeds. Yeah. So it can strengthen our anger. And so just that low-level thinking throughout the day, self-criticism, judgment, is slowly making that seed of anger bigger and bigger and bigger and stronger, so that in a moment, somebody says something, bah! When they say that thing that's not so kind, not so gentle, then the mental formation comes up, and poof, we are carried away by a strong emotion, we think it's because that person said that thing, when all along we've been watering the seed of fear, watering the seed of anger, day in, day out, hour after hour, second after second. And yet we think that one last condition, which is the thing that she said, or that he said, that is the cause of my anger. How dare you say that? I'm so angry because of what and it's your fault. We point a finger. Be careful when you start pointing fingers. Usually that means you're caught in a wrong perception. So right diligence means looking, the way out is in. We look into our own mind and we notice how we are the fuel to those afflictions. Because we know if we're able to remove the fuel, and by inviting the arisen wholesome mental formation to go back down into store consciousness, then we no longer continue to perfume, to affect the quality of the seed in our store consciousness. And the anger, the jealousy, the sadness becomes weaker. And so next time when it comes up, it's not so strong. And we're able to also invite the seed of mindfulness to come up and embrace that mental formation. And mindfulness has a quality of helping us to see what are the things that are feeding, what is the nutriment, what is the fuel that is feeding the affliction. So arisen wholesome mental formation, how they go back down, how to keep the unwholesome, I'm going to abbreviate, unwholesome mental formation from manifesting. So you want to keep it down. Again, this is not suppression. It means you don't want to feed the fire. You're removing the nutriment so that the unwholesome mental formation, maybe we can use a minus sign. We have unwholesome mental formation. We want to learn how to, next time, not to allow that mental formation to manifest. So we don't say that thing, that retort, that clever way of getting back at the person who's caused us pain. In our belief that that person, what they said, what they've done, their perception about us is the cause of our pain. We try to inflict pain back on them, and we think by doing that then we solve the situation, but we only continue to feed more flames of anger, and the situation can become a conflagration which consumes the entire relationship. And then we have a lot of time to go through the ashes that remain after the fire to try to rebuild some semblance of understanding. So better, we don't say that thing, we don't do that thing, we know how to change the peg, or Thay says change the CD, but we don't have CDs anymore. Maybe change the playlist, that's the new one I heard. Go to a different playlist. You have the playlist which waters the seeds of sadness. You have the playlist which waters the seed of anger. The playlist that waters the seed of romantic love. And you change it to one that waters seeds of joy, waters seeds of peace, waters seeds of calm, of understanding instead. So inappropriate attention becomes appropriate attention by changing the playlist. And then 3 is we invite the wholesome, positive mental formations to come up from store consciousness and manifest in the mind consciousness. So joy, we get in touch with the joy of being alive. We're still alive. I have a body. I can move my arms. I can have eyes that can see millions of colors. I can breathe in and out on my own power. It's wonderful. I can walk. I can go for a walk in nature. I can sit with a beloved one. I can do so many wonderful things. It's a joy. I mean, that's a joy. Even if there's pain, even if there's suffering, you can touch joy. And so we train ourselves with right diligence to moment invite the positive mental formations to come up. And there are many ways to do it. But all of them involve appropriate attention. As monastics, we don't have much money. We just have a little bit of pocket money. We don't have many things. And that is because we want to slowly stop the illusion that having things, having money brings us happiness. So we train ourselves to let go of our things, our objects. And at first it's difficult because we've been trained, we've grown up to think that happiness comes in having things. And but with time we see that actually that our happiness comes from how we are paying attention, what we are paying attention to. What is the object of our attention? And now it's become more obvious than ever how valuable your attention is. So many, Facebook, Twitter, newspapers, on the internet, they're all just trying to get your attention. Just a few seconds of your attention. They're desperately looking for your attention because they want to water seeds in your consciousness, to buy that thing, to keep looking at their website so that you become an addict to that social network, so that you continue to look for happiness in what people put on the social network. You identify with the people, certain people, your friends, the ones you follow, and so then that is your attention, and they've got it. So even as monks and nuns, we have attention, though we don't have much money, and fortunately, because you get your attention, and then quickly you start paying for more of that thing. But even just our attention is valuable. So we have the precept of, in the monastery, of going on the internet together, not alone. So we live in the rooms together. So in the times of the day when we have the internet, we are there with our roommate. If we are in the office, we use it together. And that is because we want to cultivate appropriate attention. Because we all know, we accept that we get carried away, that our attention is being grabbed. And there are supercomputers vying for your attention. And if you think you can win, think again. They've tested the algorithms on millions of people, billions of people, some of them. And they know. But because you think you're different, you think you're an individual, you think you're in control. But that's the whole point. You need to feel like you're in control. When in fact, The machine knows what you like, and it knows what to feed you. And it's not that it's bad, because that's what it's just been trained to do. And it's been trained by millions and millions of people using that website, using that social network, using that YouTube. I think you're watching this on YouTube. So I don't know if this video will get banned on YouTube if I say something. Be careful about the videos on the side of the screen next to this one. Okay. And then how can we attend to things in such a way that the mental formation, the positive mental formation, stays up in our mind consciousness for a long time? So how did the Buddha touch nirvana sitting under the Bodhi tree? It's because he had learned how to train his mind to invite the positive mental formations to come up and stay for a long time. That is a conditioned phenomenon. Training your mind to bring up the positive mental formations like joy, like mindfulness, like concentration, insight. That is conditioning. But that good conditioning, that appropriate attention, brings about conditions that allow us to touch the unconditioned. That is the point. By training ourselves day in and day out to be joyful, to experience peace, experience calm, less anxiety, less fear, right? We invite the unwholesome mental formations down, less anger, less jealousy, then our mind is not rigid, is not caught in its ideas, is not caught in a dogma, in an ideology, in a belief system, and is not carried away by our perceptions of what other people perceive about us, our perceptions about what we perceive that other people perceive about what they perceive about us. None of that. It doesn't become, the hook is no longer able to hook us because there's nothing to grasp onto, because we are not caught up in our ideas about this is me, this is mine, this is myself. Yeah, where it just goes through. It's like our arm moving through the air. It cannot be impeded easily. But when it's a bunch of brambles, like in the chaparral, and you try to move through the chaparral, you get caught. And your robe is stuck, and it's very difficult to move. And so that when our mind is caught in inappropriate attention, it becomes like the brambles and the chaparral, and it's very difficult to move through. But when our mind is calm, we know how to generate peace, generate joy, generate mindfulness, generate concentration, have understanding, then it's not difficult to touch nirvana in the present moment. So we make use of the historical dimension to touch the ultimate dimension. That is the essence of Buddhism. The Dhamma, what we teach, words, that is just, Thay says it's like sugar cane. If you've ever eaten sugar cane, you have to know how to eat the sugar cane. You tear it off with your feet, with your teeth, not with your feet, with your teeth. And you get you chew on the fibers to get the sweet juice from the sugar cane out. And then you don't continue to chew on the fibers, right? Try to swallow them, but you spit them out. Maybe not everyone has eaten sugar cane, but I had many times the chance to in Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries, and I love so much sugar cane. And Thay talked about the Dhamma as like sugar cane. When we get the teachings like on right diligence, we need to know that how to extract the sugar and spit out the fibers. Yeah, So if we get caught in the form of the Dhamma in the words, that is like the fiber. Once you get the sweet juice, you throw away, you spit out the fibers. So we need to treat the Dhamma like that. Last time I used the metaphor of the raft, right? But this is another metaphor that I think Thay invented this one. I don't know where he got it from, but I like it. The Dhamma is like a sugar cane. So you chew on it to get the sweetness, and you spit out the the fibers. And that way you don't get caught. Like somebody who tries to chew and swallow the fibers, they'll start coughing and feel very uncomfortable because they cannot digest it. And that is not the correct way. We don't grasp the Dhamma like that. Dhamma is there for us to touch nirvana, get the sweet, and then we can let go of it. Okay, so we covered the fifth tenet today. It is possible. This is so important. Don't waste your life thinking that you cannot touch nirvana.